Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the Ukrainian government and our friends from other nations who are here to help us crack the enigma of Ukrainian corruption. Welcome to the third annual Asset Recovery Conference in Ukraine. My sincerest apologies for not being able to attend the conference. Our Vice Chair of Transparency International, Elena Panfilova, is here to participate in the conference, and I hope to return to Ukraine next year to spur on your much-needed efforts to stop corruption. The overall purpose of this conference is to break the investigative deadlock in the cases of Yanukovych and his associates and trade ideas between domestic and regional experts in this case and the case of the $1 billion bank fraud in Moldova. The case of Gulnara Karimova of Uzbekistan, whose assets have been frozen across many European jurisdictions, will also be discussed, given that there is much to be learned from this rare, successful asset seizure. 3 weeks ago, thousands of Ukrainians gathered in Maidan Square to mark the third anniversary of start of mass protests that ultimately led to the fall of the corrupt president Viktor Yanukovych. He fled to Russia, and we learned of the fantastic wealth the ex-president and his associates stole from the people of Ukraine. Current estimates put the amount around $7.5 billion. We saw the pictures of this magnificent wooden palace, his fleet of fancy cars, and heard stories of how he and his friends used the global financial system to help steal and hide the wealth of the people of Ukraine. Unfortunately, it looks like much of the badly needed reform and investigation of past corruption in Ukraine has not happened. Over the last year, the Ukrainian authorities adopted a number of laws to get started on the hard work of asset recovery. They also created anti-corruption investigative and preventive bodies for the same purpose. Despite these actions, there is a clear lack of success stories in the recovery of stolen assets, both domestically and from abroad. More importantly, not one criminal case has been brought to trial against Yanukovych, who has resettled in a comfortable home in Russia. And now, in the absence of any investigation of several of his associates who were on the European Union list of sanctioned officials, they have been removed from this list and continue enjoying lavish lifestyles. When I look at the situation, I cannot help but to think those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Increasingly, people make statements suggesting that Yanukovych's case is old or irrelevant, and that we need to investigate him was one a time pass. It sounds as if people believe he needs less attention today than 3 years ago. And then, in the next breath, these same people complain about the creeping corruption of the current leadership in Ukraine. In fact, there has been little progress in the case against Yanukovych, and it is now at the risk of slipping from the memory of the public if the people of Ukraine give up in their hopes that Yanukovych will be successfully prosecuted. The corrupt will have won one of their most important battles, the battle to erase the public memory of their terrible acts, and they will become even more fearless, more dangerous, and even tougher to defeat. People do not feel the effectiveness of reforms until the culture of impunity no longer exists. And one of the key symbols of this culture is the inefficient investigation into the crimes of the former president and his associates. The failure to tackle the terrible crimes and thievery of Viktor Yanukovych fits criminality in Ukraine and around the world. It tells the people of Ukraine that the situation is hopeless and that real change to stop grand corruption and prevent another Viktor Yanukovych from rising and spreading his corrupt ways across Ukraine will fail. But the people of Ukraine are not fooled. In a public opinion poll we published last month about corruption in Europe and Central Asia, 86% of the people surveyed said the government of Ukraine was doing badly at fighting corruption. It was the worst score of the survey. And the anti-corruption journey is not unclear or uncertain. There is no mystery in what Ukraine needs to do. The first step is stick to the promise that criminal charges would be filed against Yanukovych this year. And we also call on the government to create an independent and accountable anti-corruption court. Some things are changing in Ukraine. We welcome the completion of the first step in providing the Ukrainian people with a public electronic register of the assets of politicians and civil servants, the ProZorro, including those of President Petro Poroshenko. Our chapter TI Ukraine played a big role in making this happen, showing the real power and essential nature of an active and independent civil society. Transparency International now calls for the declarations and the origin of the declared assets to be verified and welcomes President Poroshenko's commitment in this regard. Civil society organizations like TI Ukraine, Anti-Corruption Action Center, and others, including journalists, continue to be at the front line of the anti-corruption work. We have been and will continue to constructively support the government. We criticize, but we always offer solutions to the problems we identify. Not all public officials approve what we are doing, and the pressure on us is increasing. Recently, email accounts of TI Ukraine were hacked and then entirely depleted. We do not know who did it and will file a formal request for an investigation. But it is obvious that whoever did that to TI Ukraine wanted to intimidate our colleagues and block our work. I want to ask the Ukrainian authorities to ensure the safety of anti-corruption NGOs, journalists, and activists. Change is possible, but the pace must increase and the change must be real and sustainable. And so I end with 3 questions. When will the Ukrainian government finally bring criminal charges against Viktor Yanukovych and his cronies? When will the Ukrainian people who are victims of grand corruption start to see asset recovery and asset management, issues that will be discussed at this conference today and tomorrow, take the form of new schools, new hospitals, and less inequality? And finally, what is being done to make sure that this never happens again? Transparency International is ready to continue coordinate, facilitate, and support the efforts of Ukrainians and the Ukrainian government in asset recovery, as well as other anti-corruption reforms. I hope everybody learns today and tomorrow the power of bringing together government, civil society, and the private sector in stopping corruption. Therefore, I invite everybody to work together against corruption. Thank you very much.